Hello, and welcome to Life Diaries, a space where the pages of life open up, one story at a time. These are tales written by experience, spoken from the heart. Take a moment for yourself, and let's begin. Olivia walked from the bus stop towards her house. Spring was just beginning to assert its rights, and dusk was now falling noticeably later. Just a couple of weeks ago, at this hour, impenetrable night would have already enveloped the city. But now the sky was only painted in delicate pale lilac hues. The woman's hands were weighed down by grocery bags. Fruit for her daughter, fresh bread, a hefty piece of meat from which she could make both a rich borscht and an aromatic goulash. And of course the indispensable treats. How could they do without them on such a day? Today was payday. Tomorrow promised a day off, which meant Olivia and Alice would have their Friday ritual, watching a movie together. Her daughter had already chosen some cheerful comedy. Olivia smiled. Alice. She was the one who filled her life with meaning, made it full and truly happy. The girl was now 8. She attended a nearby school and was an excellent student. Olivia hardly helped her with homework, only occasionally supporting her with extra projects. The woman wished she could spend more time with her child, but she had to work a lot, a great deal, to provide for both of them. However, Alice managed perfectly well on her own. She grew up responsible, quick-witted, serious, and surprisingly independent. From the first grade, she had to do many things herself. Leave for school alone because by the time she left, her mother was already halfway to work on the bus. Return after lessons to an empty apartment, tidy up, eat lunch, sit down to do homework, set an alarm so as not to be late for practice. Alice played basketball at her school. The coach noted her iron character and great athletic prospects. A real miracle, not a child. Olivia smiled again, thinking about the girl. Yes, she was incredibly lucky to have such a daughter. And yet her heart ached at the sight of other children, accompanied everywhere by caring adults. Loving grandmothers, affectionate grandfathers, stay-at-home mothers, attentive fathers. These boys and girls had more time for games. They were surrounded by care. Their lives seemed happier, brighter, more protected. At first, Olivia worried greatly, letting her little daughter go alone with a huge backpack on her shoulders. Colleagues were bewildered. Aren't you afraid someone will abduct her? What if a dog attacks? What if she gets lost? Olivia just sighed. Of course, all these fears lived within her. They couldn't be gotten rid of. But she was sure of one thing. Alice wouldn't go with a stranger. She would avoid a pack of dogs, and she would definitely find her way home. She was remarkably mature for her age, attentive, sensitive, intelligent. Besides, Olivia had no other choice. She couldn't afford to stay home with the child. Changing jobs to one closer was also impossible. The brick factory where she worked as an economist paid well. How much effort it had cost to get hired there. The salary now exceeded the city average. A single mother with a daughter didn't live in luxury, but there was enough money for clothes, apartment rent, food, and even small entertainment. If Olivia started earning less, they simply wouldn't survive. And then Eleanor would have a chance to fulfill her long-held dream. Remembering her former mother-in-law, Olivia involuntarily shivered. A terrible person. And yet, once upon a time, Eleanor had seemed so sweet, open, and kind. Many years ago, when James brought a pregnant Olivia to meet his parents, the girl was very nervous. She understood perfectly well how their situation looked from the outside. A simple girl from the village, without a penny to her name, had hooked a guy from a wealthy family, pulled the wool over his eyes, taken advantage of his weakness, deliberately gotten pregnant so that James would be forced to marry her out of nobility. In reality, everything was, of course, different. But even Olivia's classmates, who knew her well, voiced similar assumptions. "Well done," redhead Hannah sincerely admired upon hearing the news. "You look so quiet and proper, but look how you've arranged your life. We couldn't even dream of it. You'll live like a queen now. Excellent plan. By the way, I should try that too." "Why not? I also want to be a rich man's wife. It's a normal desire." The girls weren't being sarcastic or malicious. They were genuinely happy for their friend, who, as they thought, had managed to pull off a risky scheme and emerge victorious, receiving a proposal from an eligible bachelor. Perhaps after her friend's reaction, Olivia realized that everyone else thought exactly the same way. And James's parents? They would, of course, look at her as an enemy. And why wouldn't they? A village outsider had arrived in the city and decided to establish herself here through a successful marriage. James was indeed from a very wealthy family, but Olivia didn't find that out right away. The guy dressed simply: jeans, t-shirts, preferring comfortable sneakers to expensive shoes. Yes, it turned out the watch on his wrist and his mobile phone were expensive. An experienced eye would have immediately recognized this. But how was a village girl supposed to know the cost of accessories? A watch was a watch. A phone was a phone. James usually came to the university on a motorcycle. Many guys zipped around in expensive cars. It was immediately clear that their families were well off. But here was a motorcycle. Olivia had always thought that bikes weren't that expensive, that anyone could afford them. Moreover, James worked part-time at a large real estate firm, holding a not very skilled position, courier or something like that. So Olivia wasn't surprised by the motorcycle. He must have saved up from his salary or taken out a loan. At the beginning of their relationship, James didn't advertise that the firm where he worked belonged to his father. The girl couldn't have imagined how successful and wealthy his parents were. Olivia had observed James from afar for a long time. They studied in different departments. He was a student in the prestigious Finance and Economics program. After school, Olivia had also dreamed of enrolling there, diligently preparing, poring over textbooks day and night, but she didn't get into that department. Olivia, a poor village girl, wanted to escape poverty. She had wonderful parents, kind, understanding, supportive. But Olivia didn't want to repeat their fate. They lived in a small house without plumbing, with a huge wash basin on the wall where they had to wash. The toilet was outside, and the bathhouse in the yard was only heated on weekends. Her parents worked hard, but there wasn't enough money. Was it like everyone else? Other families in the village lived the same way. There were simply few jobs, and salaries were tiny. People didn't despair. They tried. They survived. But Olivia didn't wish such a lot for herself. Her parents supported their daughter in her desire to get an education and stay in the city. They even tried not to burden her with household chores so she could devote all her time to studying. "Study, my dear," her mother instructed. "Study. Don't be lazy. God willing, you'll make something of yourself. You have a bright head." "Your teacher says you're smart and promising," her father echoed. Olivia was indeed the best in her class. Studying came easily to her. She saw the university entrance exams as a decisive battle in the fight for a happy life, and she endured it with dignity. She scored many points. The result was a pleasant surprise. But still, it wasn't enough to get into the finance and economics department on a scholarship. Olivia felt disappointed then, mixed with bewilderment. How could this be? In school, she was head and shoulders above others, and why had so many people suddenly surpassed her? Only later did the girl learn about tutors who coached for tests, about gifts to the dean's office. Back then, she blamed herself for insufficient preparation. She missed the scholarship by just a few points. However, she easily qualified for the paid program. "Well, you'll study for a year or two on the paid program, and then someone will be expelled, and you'll transfer to a scholarship. An unfamiliar senior student comforted Olivia, unable to pass by the girl sobbing by the results board. Many people do that. You miss the points by just a little, which means you have the brains. Such students are valued. Olivia just shook her head. This girl wouldn't understand that even the annual tuition fee was an unbearable burden for her family. Olivia had already decided that the year was lost. She would have to return to the village and prepare again, more seriously. But even that didn't guarantee that her dream would come true the following year. But that same comforter, a chance savior, offered a completely different solution. Why do you need this finance and economics department? She shrugged. It's mostly connections and children of the rich there. The same education is given in the enterprise economics department, maybe even better, less pretense. How grateful Olivia was to her chance helper then. She later tried to find this girl, talk to her, say thank you, but it didn't work out. It turned out that Olivia's scores were more than enough for the other department, so she did become a student after all. As a village girl, she was given a dormitory room and a social scholarship. Olivia couldn't believe her luck for a long time. She studied diligently, attended all lectures, submitted term papers on time, and always did her homework. Professors praised her and held her up as an example. Olivia felt a little awkward. She devoted all her time and energy to studying. True, she also had to work 2 or 3 hours in the evening as a salesperson in a bakery. The scholarship wasn't enough to live on. Her parents couldn't help, so she managed as best she could. There was absolutely no time for clubs, discos, or student parties. Sometimes she felt sad, but each time Olivia reminded herself of the goal she was striving for, and everything fell into place. Classmates often talked enthusiastically about their weekends, shared details of romantic adventures, and described admirers. At such moments, Olivia also dreamed of a decent young man, loving, caring, cheerful, handsome, of course. Someone she could fall madly in love with. But the guys who entered her field of vision didn't measure up to the role of a prince. Many were handsome and cheerful, but seemed too careless, frivolous, and selfish to Olivia. She couldn't imagine tying her fate to any of them. Her friends jokingly called Olivia a bore, and when she refused to go to yet another party, they threatened her with a lonely old age surrounded by a dozen cats. And then, in her 4th year, she finally saw a guy who didn't leave her indifferent. How had she not noticed him before? Strange. The young man skillfully roared into the parking lot on a black motorcycle. He was in jeans, a black t-shirt, and wore a helmet. What attracted her to him then? The skill with which he handled the iron horse? Or his special, graceful posture? At that moment, he reminded her of a prince on a noble steed. Anyway, Olivia, who was hurrying to the library, stopped and watched from afar as the motorcyclist dismounted and took off his helmet. For some reason, she really wanted to see his eyes. She would have been better off not doing that, because when James, as if sensing her gaze, looked in her direction, Olivia knew she was lost. Piercing turquoise eyes on a tanned face, a snow-white smile, thick hair of an incredible wheat shade. Olivia could have admired him endlessly, if not for the rules of decency. Suddenly, she felt awkward, standing there, staring at a stranger. What would he think? Olivia sharply turned around and hurried towards the library building. The guy caught up with her, almost at the entrance. He gently held her by the arm. Olivia turned around and blushed, meeting his slightly mocking gaze. The stranger smiled warmly, openly, sincerely. Olivia had never experienced such feelings. It was hard to describe. Chills ran down her back and neck. Warmth spread through her body. Her heart pounded like crazy. That day marked the beginning of their romance. At first beautiful, like a fairy tale. but it ended more like a bad horror movie. James confessed that he had felt her gaze and understood from her eyes that she was the one he could be happy with. Only later, analyzing the situation, Olivia realized the guy was simply sated with beautiful, spoiled, selfish princesses from wealthy families. And here was a simple, unsophisticated, very pretty village girl. Olivia looked at James with loving eyes, hung on his every word, admired everything he did or said. She was happy about little things like a bouquet of roses, amazed by the luxury of restaurants. James found it interesting to observe the emotions of an unspoiled girl. He was opening a new world to the poor student. It was intoxicating, instilled a belief in his own power, tickled his ego. Of course, James also developed some feelings for the girl for whom he was everything. It couldn't have been otherwise. But he never intended to make Olivia the center of his universe. True, Olivia only realized all this later, when problems began. At first, it seemed to her that James was performing one feat after another for her sake. The guy was generous, spending money on the girl. Olivia felt awkward. She tried to refuse. If anyone knew how hard money was earned, it was her. James worked as a courier and earned money, but that didn't mean he had to spend everything on her. The guy just smiled at her objections and gave her another luxurious gift. Their relationship resembled sometimes a romantic comedy, sometimes a beautiful melodrama. James was sweet, considerate, incredibly charming in his courtship, and always knew how to cheer her up. Olivia still devoted a lot of time to studying, but now lectures and seminars didn't constitute her whole life. Surprisingly, there was enough time for everything, for dates with James, and for poring over notebooks. It was a wonderful, unforgettable time. James and Olivia had been dating for about a year when the girl realized with horror that she was expecting a child. At first, she couldn't believe it. They had been so careful. But one test after another stubbornly showed two bright lines. She had to accept the fact. The girl was desperate. Graduation was approaching, state exams, the final stretch. She had worked towards this for so long. Okay, perhaps the pregnancy wouldn't prevent her from preparing for the final tests. She would write her thesis, pass the exams. But by the end of her 5th year, she would have a huge belly. Who would hire someone like that? She would have to stay home and take care of the child. And what had those 5 years of studying been for then? Would James be happy? Would he take responsibility? Their relationship seemed elevated, trusting. But a beautiful romance was one thing. A burden in the form of a pregnant Olivia was another. The girl cried for about an hour from despair, resentment, fear for the future. Then she calmed down and decided to tell everything to the person on whom her fate depended. James received the news of the pregnancy with unexpected joy. For him, it was still a game. Wow, we're going to be parents. The guy's eyes lit up. A smile appeared. We'll have our own little one. Cool. He was happy about the baby like a new toy. Olivia didn't notice it then. She was happy that her beloved didn't see the pregnancy as a problem. And what are we going to do now? The girl asked hopefully. We'll get married, of course. He smiled, hugging Olivia. We'll get married, finish studying, then I'll go to work, and you'll be on maternity leave. And where will we live? This question worried Olivia very much. She would be evicted from the dormitory soon. Would she have to move into James's apartment? Living with her husband's relatives would probably be difficult. She'd have to adjust. We'll live in my apartment. James shrugged. My father gave it to me a long time ago. It's big, spacious. You'll like it. I would have moved in long ago, but Mother. She said I could only do that when I got married. That was the condition. And now I'm getting married. You have an apartment? Olivia couldn't believe it. Who are your parents? She knew little about his family, James always changed the subject. Well, what is there to tell about them? James grimaced. Folks are folks. Mother is a housewife, spent her whole life taking care of me and my brothers, driving us to clubs. There are 3 of us, remember? Olivia nodded. James had mentioned 2 older brothers. Well, there you go, he continued. Mother takes care of the house, father runs a business, a real estate agency. Didn't I tell you? No, Olivia shook her head. Well, now I'm telling you. So don't worry, there will definitely be a place to live. By the way, I need to introduce you to my parents. Mother will be happy. She thinks I have a screw loose, always holding up my older brothers as examples. Now she'll see that I'm responsible too. Olivia was very afraid of the meeting. James was sure that his father and mother would like her. The girl doubted it. Of course, no one would believe that she hadn't guessed his wealth. Even her friends thought she had deliberately gotten pregnant by a rich kid. What could she say about his relatives? But the introduction went more than successfully. Despite the fact that Olivia was flustered by the luxurious interiors of the mansion. A table was set in the living room. Everything looked appetizing. But from nervousness, she couldn't swallow a bite. The parents introduced themselves. Eleanor, her future mother-in-law, smiled openly. She had the same turquoise eyes as her son. Olivia was amazed at how James's mother looked. She was much older than Olivia's own mother, but there were no wrinkles on Eleanor's face. Slim, toned, flawless skin, a stylish dress. The groom's father also didn't look his age. Fit, energetic. In conversation, James's parents, despite their wealth, turned out to be pleasant and simple. Upon learning Olivia's story, Eleanor was delighted. "What a clever girl you are," she praised. "You've achieved so much through your own hard work. Amazing determination." "I need people like you," Arthur added. "I'll take you on after your maternity leave, so don't worry about work." Olivia couldn't believe her happiness then. Everything seemed like a fairy tale. James's parents not only didn't show displeasure with their poor pregnant daughter-in-law, but were genuinely happy. "Our rascal needs exactly this kind of girl." Eleanor shook her head, smiling at Olivia. "Responsible, serious, hardworking. What a blessing that you met." Olivia didn't understand then why he was called a rascal. He seemed serious and conscientious. Well, he sometimes rode his motorcycle fast, spent time with friends. But he was still young, carefree. It was natural. When else to have fun but in youth? James's parents arranged a lavish wedding for the young couple. Olivia was embarrassed that they bore all the expenses. Her parents were also awkward, but Eleanor behaved so simply, so naturally, that the tension dissipated. She conversed kindly and respectfully with Olivia's parents, thanking them for raising such a wonderful daughter. She smiled warmly at her daughter-in-law, showering her with compliments. Olivia, in the dress her mother-in-law helped choose and paid for, looked like a real princess and behaved accordingly. James was proud that his young wife was a beauty. For the first half of the wedding, he didn't let go of her hand. But then, when the official part was over, he ran off to his friends. Olivia was happy for him. She liked that he was sociable and cheerful. Married life at first also resembled a fairy tale. Olivia lived in a huge, stylishly furnished apartment. Before, she had only seen such interiors in magazines. It took her a long time to get used to being the mistress of all this splendor. She got her own card, onto which a round sum magically appeared twice a month. James transferred it for household expenses. Accustomed to saving, Olivia at first couldn't spend it all. It was wonderful, unusual, to go into a store and throw everything she liked into the cart, instead of looking for discounted products. Her relationship with James's parents was excellent. She considered them family. Eleanor often invited her over, and they talked for a long time. Olivia talked about herself, her mother-in-law about her life. It turned out that Eleanor had also grown up in a village. Then her family moved to the city, where she met Arthur. He was just a simple accountant at the factory then, she recalled. Later, Arthur started a business. I helped. I supported him. So it's our joint creation. And Eleanor often said that she had dreamed of a daughter her whole life. I wanted a daughter so much, but only boys were born. And the youngest, James, only appeared because I was hoping for a girl. One last try. And here was another boy. And strangely enough, the most loved of the three. Although at first I was very disappointed. I was sure I was carrying a daughter this time. Her 2 older sons had given her 4 grandsons, and here she didn't get to cuddle a girl. I dream of buying my granddaughter dolls, braiding her hair, choosing dresses, doing everything I wanted to do with a daughter. And here again, boys, toy trains, construction sets, cars. I adore them, of course, but I crave something sweet, girly, pink. Now all my hope is on you. Before this revelation, Olivia didn't care about the baby's gender. But after, she suddenly realized that she also dreamed of a little girl with turquoise eyes like James's and long hair. It would be wonderful, braiding hair, tying bows, dressing her in pink dresses. James, on the other hand, dreamed of a son. That's what he said. Although Olivia increasingly felt that he didn't care about this child at all. James spent a lot of time at work, and in the evenings and on weekends, he ran off to his friends. This was not like the beginning of their relationship. Olivia hoped that with the birth of the baby, he would settle down. But she was wrong. It only got worse. Alice was born on time. When Olivia was handed the tiny red creature to hold against her chest, she understood. From this moment, life was divided into before and after. Now she was a mother. James and his parents arranged a lavish discharge from the hospital. There was everything: a bear animator, pink and white balloons, flowers, happy relatives, a cameraman. Eleanor tremblingly accepted the pink bundle. Finally, her dream had come true. She had a granddaughter, long awaited, beloved. James also seemed happy, posing with his daughter in his arms. But Olivia immediately noticed. He was bored. There was no genuine joy in his eyes, not a flicker of the delight she or her mother-in-law felt. Family life flowed on. Olivia was completely immersed in caring for her daughter. Eleanor often visited the young mother and the newborn girl, teaching her how to care for an infant. Olivia was a mother for the first time and didn't know anything. The science wasn't complicated. Very soon she felt confident. But Eleanor continued to come, and Olivia didn't object. She saw how much her mother-in-law rejoiced in her granddaughter. It was wonderful that someone else besides the parents loved the child, especially since James wasn't very interested in Alice. His daughter seemed to irritate him. He grimaced when the girl cried, especially after bedtime, complaining about sleepless nights. No, he didn't get up for the child. Olivia always ran to her. It was just that the nighttime commotion interfered with the full sleep of the head of the family. James spent more and more time away from home. He might not come home to sleep. When asked, he replied that he wasn't her slave and had the right to a break from family. Gradually, the rose-colored glasses fell from Olivia's eyes. James showed himself for who he was. That's why Eleanor called him a rascal and said he had a screw loose. He turned out to be completely unprepared for family life. Responsibilities weighed him down. No. At family celebrations, he gladly held his charming, dressed-up little daughter in his arms. Olivia saw he was simply admiring himself and proud of his new role as a father. But on ordinary days, he avoided contact with the little one. He preferred not to talk to Olivia. It was hurtful and confusing. Eventually, Olivia found out what was going on. She accidentally overheard a conversation. One morning, James thought she was in a deep sleep after rocking Alice for 3 hours. The little one wasn't feeling well, was fussy, and only dozed in her mother's arms. But Olivia, from exhaustion, couldn't close her eyes and heard everything. James tried to speak quietly. He was cooing, there's no other way to put it, with someone who seemed to be a very young girl, calling her Bunny and my love, laughing, promising that they would have fun soon. Olivia lay in bed, barely restraining herself from rushing into the kitchen and causing a scene. But it wouldn't lead to anything. James had long become almost a stranger. They lived together, yes. James, importantly, fully provided for her and Alice. But what would she give her daughter if she left? She had to pretend that nothing had happened. From then on, Olivia often noticed signs of infidelity. Girls called him when he was home. The man hardly hid it. No, he spoke more reservedly when his wife was present than when he thought Olivia couldn't hear. He might come back in the morning, explaining a crucial business meeting. Meanwhile, a bracelet from a nightclub often adorned his wrist, and his clothes smelled of women's perfume. Sometimes he went on business trips for 5 to 7 days, returning refreshed, rested, sometimes tanned, clearly under the southern sun. Olivia endured it, feeling humiliated, crushed, lost, broken. She still loved James and, until recently, believed he had feelings. Well, yes, he had cooled off a bit, it happens, especially after a child appears. For some men, it's a test. And for James, it turned out he had an affair. Or affairs. He addressed his young, beautiful interlocutors differently. Christine, Elena, Caroline. Olivia, having put tiny Alice to bed, often cried, curled up in a ball in the armchair by the crib. The woman understood that she was in a desperate situation. Living with a cheating husband was unbearable. James had long looked at her as nothing. When had they last had a heart-to-heart talk? Olivia couldn't remember. She had to leave him, otherwise she would completely lose herself. But what next? Where to go with a small daughter? To a rented apartment again. She would have to go back to work. Alice was still tiny. She would get sick in kindergarten. Who needed an employee who constantly had to take sick leave? It was unlikely she would find a job during this period. Returning to the village was also a bad idea. Olivia had made maximum efforts to escape from there, and now to live in a tiny house without amenities again. To condemn her daughter to that? No, she had to come up with something else. Her mother-in-law continued to visit her daughter-in-law and granddaughter frequently. Each time she brought Alice luxurious gifts, a designer dress, gold earrings, an expensive doll. It was clear. The elderly woman adored the girl. Olivia, as the mother of this princess, also received attention. The sensitive Eleanor had long noticed that her daughter-in-law was sad and thoughtful. She asked directly, but Olivia evaded answers. She hadn't slept well. She had a headache. Eleanor was a wonderful person. Olivia had no doubt then. But how could she tell about the humiliation she had to endure day after day? One day, Olivia realized she had to act. It happened on a rainy autumn evening. James came home late, stating he had a business dinner. Olivia pretended to believe him, but then she accidentally saw a photograph. James was scrolling through his phone feed, smiling happily. Olivia glanced at the screen and froze. There was a photo. He was posing, hugging a beautiful blonde. She was smiling broadly, pressing gently against him. It was a selfie. And then Olivia's visor dropped. "What is this?" she burst out, shouting. James looked up at her with calm eyes. The photograph, his indifference, his husband's calmness, seeing nothing unusual, finally drove Olivia over the edge. Long suppressed emotions broke free along with sobs and insults. She called him terrible names, screamed hurtful phrases, wanting to wound him as deeply as possible. She waited for him to justify himself, to apologize. But he looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust and remained silent. Olivia, losing control, delivered a resounding slap. She put all her strength into it. The blow was forceful. As if in slow motion, she watched James's head snap back. He had to grab onto the table. Olivia had achieved her goal. She had shaken him out of his state of cold indifference. James looked at her with such malice that the woman froze with horror. The man strode towards her and grabbed her hair tightly. Olivia felt the strong grip. If he wanted to, he could easily crush her. It was clear he was barely restraining himself. Olivia, her eyes wide with fear, looked at her husband and blamed herself for losing control. "Listen to me carefully," James hissed. "I'm saying this once. I won't repeat it. If this happens again, you'll fly out of here like a cork. You'll be as penniless as you were. You won't see alimony. The salary is mostly unofficial. You'll get pennies. Do you understand?" Olivia nodded silently, trembling. She wanted only one thing, for this to end. But James didn't let go of her hair, wrapping it around his fist. "Do you think I don't understand that you deliberately fell pregnant by a rich guy? Do you think you're the only one so cunning? I didn't marry you because of that. I'll explain now. Firstly, you used to be decent looking. Secondly, a marriage with someone like you should be easy and unburdening. People like you should be happy with where they've landed. Raise the children, serve your husband, and keep your mouth shut. Everyone has their own benefit. Yours is comfort, a secure life. Mine is freedom. Do I really need to explain this? Don't you understand it yourself?" James pushed his wife away forcefully. Olivia stumbled backward towards the door. His eyes still blazed with rage. Fortunately, he restrained himself and didn't hit her, but he was clearly close to it. Olivia understood. Such a scene would repeat itself. James would find something to latch onto, and he could hit her. Easily. Sooner or later. After that incident, life went on as usual. James also disappeared for days and nights. Now he didn't hide it, talking to his girlfriends in front of his wife. Olivia was no longer hurt. She was scared. She understood that she couldn't live like this. It was destroying her. But there was no way out. James was right. She had nowhere to go, nothing to live on. And then, in despair, Olivia made the biggest mistake. She turned to Eleanor for help. She thought her mother-in-law was fond of her. Gifts, kindness, compliments. So she didn't expect to hear such words. "Well, that's not surprising." She shrugged. "James has been a rascal from a young age. I didn't expect... No, I once hoped he would settle down, but now I see. He's an eternal child. But what am I supposed to do?" Olivia looked at her mother-in-law hopefully. "Well, what now? Live as you are. James will provide for you and your daughter from head to toe, I guarantee it. What can you do? That's the price for a comfortable life. You won't even talk to him?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't see the point." Eleanor shook her head. "You can't change James. I can't live with him. I'll get a divorce." "Foolish." Her mother-in-law became worried. "And how will you manage alone? Alimony is pennies. You have nowhere to live." "I'll go back to my family in the village. Better that than endure all this. Alice will grow up, then I'll think about how to move back to the city." "You'll take Alice?" Now Eleanor was seriously worried. "Meaning I won't see her?" "No, I won't deprive you of her," Olivia assured. "You can come visit or I'll come to you. But I can't live with James. He's cruel, selfish. It's destroying me." "So I'll see my granddaughter when you graciously permit," her mother-in-law clarified, ignoring the words about her son. She was only concerned about Alice, her long-awaited, beloved granddaughter, the object of her pride. "That's how it turns out. I'm her mother. It's up to me to decide who the child sees and when." "You're mistaken, dear. How good it is that you confided your plans to me. The child will be left with James in case of divorce. I'll take care of that." "No!" Now Olivia was frightened. "Here, children are left with their mother." "Yes, but if the mother is able to provide, and you'll deprive your daughter of normal conditions, you'll take her to a remote village, to a house without amenities. You don't have a job, and James has a comfortable apartment. They'll draw up whatever salary he needs. Judge your chances yourself." "But James doesn't need her," Olivia exclaimed in despair. She hadn't expected such a turn. She had considered her mother-in-law an ally. She had hoped that after the divorce, Eleanor would help with Alice. But it turned out her mother-in-law had decided to take her daughter. "But I need her," Eleanor said slowly. "I've dreamed of a daughter my whole life, then a granddaughter. So many plans, hopes. And now I have Alice. And you want to take her away?" "No way." Olivia still found the strength to leave her husband then. Alice had just turned 3. It wasn't easy. Her parents and aunt were very supportive. With their combined efforts, they gathered money so their daughter and niece could rent an apartment in the city, well-maintained, clean, spacious, one that wouldn't raise questions from the guardianship authorities, to whom Eleanor, of course, had turned. Her relatives paid the rent for 6 months. During that time, Olivia enrolled her daughter in kindergarten and found a job. Now she had both good living conditions and a sufficient salary. Eleanor couldn't take the girl. But the fight for Alice continues to this day. Olivia had hoped that one of Eleanor's sons would have a girl, and her mother-in-law would shift her attention. But James, who soon after the divorce married a young woman resembling a model, became the father of 2 sons. The wife of one of his brothers also gave birth to a boy. Alice remained Eleanor's only granddaughter, which is why she didn't give up. Her former mother-in-law constantly wrote complaints to guardianship. Sometimes the daughter-in-law wasn't looking after the child. Sometimes she was too busy with her personal life. Sometimes she was cruel. Olivia and her mother got used to visits from the police and guardianship. No violations were found. But Olivia lived in constant fear. Who knew? Eleanor was rich, influential. Sooner or later she would come up with something, set up a situation. Olivia couldn't imagine life without Alice anymore. The girl was the center of her universe. Everything Olivia did was for her. James wasn't interested in Alice's affairs, didn't participate in her life, and transferred meager alimony from his official earnings. This approach suited Alice just fine. He didn't interfere. Good. Less hassle. It was a pity Eleanor wasn't so indifferent. Now Olivia was hurrying home. Alice was probably waiting. Olivia had been delayed. She had stopped at the shopping center for a minute but spent almost an hour there. So many new, interesting things. And good discounts, too. Now she hurried, weaving through the crowd of passers-by, of whom there were many at this hour. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to an old woman. Frail, hunched over, in an old coat, her head wrapped in a gray, downy shawl, worn felt boots on her feet. Her eyes were an astonishing pale blue, as if faded. The old woman looked around, addressing one person, then another, but people didn't hear or see her. Passers-by hurried about their business. Olivia couldn't pass by. Coming alongside, she stopped. The old woman seemed to understand that she had found a listener. She looked into Olivia's eyes and rustled in a quiet voice. "My dear, please help. I'm in a desperate situation." Olivia saw. It was true. From the old woman's face, she was close to panic. What happened? Olivia asked gently. I came here for meat. The elderly stranger began to explain. You know, there's good meat in the basement here. Well, so while I was doing this and that, I put my hand in my pocket, and my wallet wasn't there. And only then did it hit me. I left it at home, on the bedside table. It's all Jasper, the cat. While I was chasing that rascal from the street, everything flew out of my head. Okay, I had money for a one-way ticket in another pocket, so I got here without a problem. But I don't know how to get home now. So you need money for the bus? Olivia clarified. I do. The old woman was embarrassed. It's awkward to ask, like a beggar. But what can I do? Bus drivers are mean now. They won't just take you. And I still need to take the intercity bus. I live outside the city, in a dacha village. I tried to go back, asked the driver if he would take me without money. He chewed me out in front of all the passengers so badly that I'm afraid to ask another. And so, no one helped? Olivia was genuinely surprised. No. The old woman sighed sadly. There weren't many people there, fortunately. Otherwise, the driver would have shamed me so much. It's okay. Of course, I'll help. Olivia reached into her purse. My dear, thank you so much. God grant health to such a good, caring person. The elderly woman was almost crying with gratitude. Give me your address or phone number. Better write it down. My son will transfer the money to you later. It's not necessary. Olivia smiled. It's not hard for me to help. Kind people also helped me in a difficult moment. So, consider it paid forward. Thank you, my dear. Olivia nodded and walked on. She was in a hurry. Alice was waiting at home. Olivia had a wonderful evening with her daughter. They enjoyed ice cream and pizza, watched movies, cuddling on the sofa. At such moments, Olivia felt happy, protected. What warm and cozy evenings. The woman waited all week for Friday for this, to relax and rest in her daughter's company. Sometimes, very rarely, on weekends, Olivia would go out somewhere with friends or colleagues, to the cinema, a bar, a club. If Eleanor found out about this outing, a visit from guardianship immediately followed. How did she find out about her former daughter-in-law's personal life? Was she spying? Her friends thought it was time for Olivia to find a man. You're young, beautiful, her colleague Joanna urged, and always alone. You can't live like that. Alice will grow up, she'll have her own life. And you, alone? Olivia just smiled and shook her head. After James's betrayal, all men seemed like deceivers. She didn't want to date, go on dates, hope for the ideal person, and then be disappointed. No way. And honestly, she didn't have time for romance. Work, child, household, all on her fragile shoulders. No, thank you. Up until... She really didn't have time for that. Saturday morning in their family always started late. Mother and daughter preferred to sleep in after a hard week. But this time, the sleepy silence was broken by a sharp ring. Olivia struggled to open her eyelids, glanced at the clock. Only 10. Who decided to disturb us so early? Neighbors, probably. She reluctantly got up, put on her robe. A sleepy Alice came out of the children's room, so cute in her pajamas with bears. The morning visitor didn't let them lie in peace. The doorbell rang a second time. Coming! Olivia shouted, trying to keep her voice from sounding too angry. She peeked through the peephole, and anxiety seized her. A man stood on the landing, tall, young, unfamiliar. Not a neighbor. Who is it? The woman asked. My name is Anthony. The man introduced himself. I have a few questions for you. Are you from the police or guardianship? Olivia was used to visits from officials, but they introduced themselves with their full name and rank. And here? No, not from the police. You see? I'm the son of the old woman you gave money for a ticket yesterday. Ah, that's what this is about. The elderly woman had indeed sent her son to return the money. But how did he know the address? Olivia hadn't told her yesterday. Strange and suspicious. I understand you're afraid to open. Anthony's voice came again. And rightly so. You have to be vigilant these days. Let's do this. I'll step out of the building and wait on the porch. Agreed? We'll talk there. Okay, Olivia agreed. That was the most reasonable option. But the morning visit from a stranger still seemed odd. The main thing was, how did he find her? She looked out the window. Anthony was standing by the entrance. It was a little scary to go out. What if he was a criminal and had an accomplice on the landing? But there was no one at the door. Olivia went downstairs. Anthony met her on the porch. You see, I have a question for you. A delicate one, the man began. Olivia tensed. Something told her the conversation would be unpleasant. What is it? My mother. She's very elderly. Age. Her mind isn't quite right. Not incapacitated, of course, but mother. She's like a child, you understand? Olivia nodded. She knew that many people became childlike with age. The old woman yesterday didn't give that impression. But if her son said so? Only what did it have to do with her? Yesterday, Mother found herself in a desperate situation, without money, far from home. Perhaps in despair, she offered you her item in exchange for a ticket. What item? Olivia was genuinely surprised. The old woman hadn't offered any item. She had only asked for a phone number. What do you mean, what item? The man looked closely at Olivia. Something hostile appeared in his demeanor. She didn't give me anything. I mean, absolutely nothing. She just asked for money, I gave it, and that was it. And that's all? You're lying. There are witnesses who saw and heard everything. Thanks to them, I found you. An acquaintance of mine works nearby. He saw the scene and noticed which building you entered. Finding you there was easy. He asked the neighbors which apartment you lived in, described your appearance. I don't understand anything. Olivia shook her head. What are you accusing me of? Nothing yet. Mother gave the jewelry voluntarily. You didn't extort it. There are witnesses. But now, when you're being stubborn, it doesn't look good. You took advantage of the old woman's state and took possession of a valuable item. What valuable item? Olivia exclaimed. Explain properly. And you, it seems, are a brilliant actress. Anthony sneered, his lips curled contemptuously. Frankly, I hope this was a misunderstanding. By the way, it's a brooch, a family heirloom. Not only is it worth a considerable sum itself, but it's also an antique piece. It's worth a fortune. And you think I have it? Well, who else? You gave the old woman money yesterday? Yes. In return, she offered the brooch. Perhaps you took it without realizing how valuable it was. Anthony seemed to be giving her one last chance. I didn't see any brooch. This is a misunderstanding. Mother said she gave it to the girl who paid for her fare. That's you, which means the brooch is with you. But no, how can I prove it to you? Just give the jewelry back. I have a witness. And Mother will confirm it in court, if necessary. She'll confirm that you took the jewelry. In court? Olivia felt cold shivers. This man? Would he really sue? This is absurd. But he had a witness. Apparently it's true. Otherwise, how would he have found me so quickly? What if Olivia can't prove her innocence in court? Will they accuse her of extortion? No one is safe from judicial errors. Olivia clutched her head. She absolutely cannot be a defendant right now. Not even a suspect. No way. Eleanor knows her every step. She'll find out immediately. She'll take advantage. Problems with the law for the mother? A weighty argument for guardianship. They could take Alice. This cannot be allowed. If you've already gotten rid of the brooch somewhere, Anthony spoke again in a soft, insinuating voice. Who knows, maybe you knew they'd be looking for it. Sold it quickly, then at least return the money. It's worth about... And the man named a figure that made Olivia's head spin. She couldn't save that amount in several years. They won't give a loan. The previous one isn't paid off. Her salary won't allow it. Unless at a high interest rate? How would she live then? The situation is hopeless. She can't let it go to court because her mother-in-law will get a chance to gain custody. But there's nowhere to get the money from either. You're mistaken. Olivia tried to reach him one more time. I didn't take the brooch, and I don't have the money. Excellent. Then we'll settle it in court. The jewelry is insured. If they prove your guilt, which I don't doubt, we'll at least get compensation. And you'll have big problems. Wait! Olivia exclaimed. Give me some time to think. Trouble fell unexpectedly. I don't know what to do. Just give me the jewelry or return the money. Olivia shook her head. She wanted to scream at Anthony that she hadn't taken anything, but she shouldn't anger him. Her fate depended on him. I need time. All right. Anthony nodded. But don't take too long. Let's exchange phone numbers. I'll call you the day after tomorrow. I hope you find the money. Or decide to return the brooch. Otherwise we'll talk differently. Most likely, in court. Anthony sharply turned around and walked towards the parking lot. Olivia watched him go for a long time. Mom, what happened? Alice looked at her mother, who had returned with fright. You're pale. Who was that man? Just an old acquaintance. Nothing serious. Olivia smiled faintly. Shall we make pancakes? Remember, I promised to teach you. Of course. Alice and Olivia spent about an hour in the kitchen. The girl chattered happily about her friends and teachers. The woman nodded, smiled, asked questions, praised her. But her thoughts were far away. She was thinking about how to get out of this strange situation. Anthony won't give up. It's obvious. He's convinced himself that Olivia took the brooch. Nothing will change his mind. That old woman? Why did she say that? Maybe the grandmother isn't well. Or, having lost the brooch, she made up a story for her son so he wouldn't scold her. Judging by Anthony's behavior, he can be tough, cruel, a cold gaze, jerky movements. Either way, Olivia needs to decide. Becoming a suspect right now is impossible. It's unknown whether she'll be able to prove her innocence. The only option, find the money. Where? There's no one to help. Her parents are poor. Her salary is decent, but it won't cover the debt even in several years. A loan is unlikely. There was only one way out. Turn to James. The main thing is that he doesn't tell his mother, and he'll quickly figure out how to turn the situation to his advantage. She's long dreamed of taking Alice. And James? He doesn't need his daughter. Definitely not. He won't fight for her. She'll have to swallow her pride and resentment. Call her ex-husband. How hard. Unbearably hard. But what else can she do? James has never participated in his daughter's life, except for the meager alimony. Maybe he'll help just this once. For him, this amount isn't that big. Olivia sent her daughter to watch cartoons and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. James answered immediately. Hi, I need to talk. Something wrong with Alice? James asked indifferently. No, but it concerns her too. Something has happened to me. They met that evening at a cafe. James had once invited her here on dates. They used to sell wonderful strawberry eclairs here, but they weren't there now. So, what's the matter? James's whole demeanor showed he had little time. 5 years had passed since the divorce. James had barely changed. He still looked like a carefree guy from a TV show, a club regular. Perhaps Eleanor was right. James was an eternal boy. Olivia briefly told him what had happened. A smirk appeared in James's eyes. Yes, Something like this could only happen to you. He's a typical fraudster. Threaten him with a police report. He's going to file a report against me. Olivia sighed. And I can't get involved with the police. You know, your mother. She's waiting for a moment to take Alice. Mother. James sighed sadly. True. She gets on my nerves too. Always nagging me to sue for my daughter. Why would I want that? A child is always better off with her mother. Olivia nodded, then asked again. So, will you help? Will you lend me the money? Without interest? I'll pay it back little by little. No, James replied. I'm not going to sponsor criminals. He'll demand even more later. That's how those people are. You can't feed them. Olivia sighed. She understood. She wouldn't get help. Turning to him was a mistake. When he calls, tell him that a report against him is already at the station, her ex-husband advised. He paid the bill and left the cafe. Olivia was again left alone with her problem. Yes, she understood that Anthony might be a fraudster. But what if he wasn't? She couldn't risk it because Eleanor. She wasn't sleeping. She had recently reported to guardianship that her daughter-in-law was going out at night and not looking after the child. This was because Olivia had gone to a friend's birthday party. Alice had stayed home alone, brushed her teeth, and gone to bed herself. Olivia returned when her daughter was asleep. How did her mother-in-law find out? She saw a photo of Olivia on her friend's social media page, matched the dates and times, and used it as evidence. Olivia had been advised then to hire a babysitter for such cases, but she was also sympathized with. Living under such scrutiny was difficult. Eleanor's persistence was becoming increasingly frightening. If she found out about the court case now, she would use her connections and fulfill her dream. No, Olivia wouldn't give her a chance. What to do? She decided to walk home. It wasn't a short walk, but the weather was wonderful. Spring, sun, birds singing, the sky clear and very blue. The snow was melting before her eyes, patches of asphalt appearing. Before, Olivia would have felt a surge of spirit. Nature was waking up. Summer was coming soon. But today, her heart was heavy. An insurmountable problem had fallen upon her. How to solve it? Find the money or prove to Anthony that she was innocent? Both options seemed impossible. Olivia ambled past the very shopping center where she had met the old woman. To think they had to cross paths. If she had gone later or earlier, none of this would have happened. She would be living peacefully, enjoying spring, the sun, her vacation. And suddenly she stopped as if struck by lightning. She blinked several times to make sure she wasn't imagining things. The same old woman was walking through the parking lot. The coat, the shawl, and the eyes. Eyes of an incredible pale blue shade. Beside her, carefully supporting her by the elbow so she wouldn't slip on the melting snow, walked a young man. And it was not Anthony. Short, light-haired, with a pleasant, open face, and exactly the same eyes. He was smiling, telling the elderly woman something. She was listening attentively, interjecting comments. The pair was walking away. Soon they would get into a car and leave. No, she couldn't let that happen. Fate itself had given her a unique chance. Now she would talk to the old woman, and everything would become clear. Olivia hurried after them. Perhaps they are in cahoots with that man. Another unpleasant conversation. But it's worth trying, isn't it? Wait! Olivia shouted when they had almost disappeared around the corner. The elderly woman was the first to turn around. For a moment, she peered at Olivia, squinting her nearsighted eyes, and her face lit up with a smile. She recognized the passerby who had given her money a couple of days ago. The man saw Olivia for the first time and looked at the stranger questioningly. Hello, Olivia breathed out, catching up. Good day, the man greeted. Hello, my dear. The grandmother smiled warmly. I recognized you. You were the one who helped me then. Thank you so much. The man, understanding, also smiled. So you were the one who didn't pass by my mother? She told me how desperate she was, and people just rushed past. Only you responded. So you are also her son? Olivia clarified. What do you mean, also? The grandmother was surprised. Victor is my only son, late, long awaited. Before him, only daughters were born. I have 4 daughters, all much older than my son. The older ones are grandmothers themselves now. But what about Anthony? Olivia's eyes were wide. What Anthony? The old woman frowned. I don't think I know anyone like that. Did something happen to you? Victor finally guessed. And is it somehow related to that incident? Olivia nodded silently. She didn't understand anything. One thing was clear. Anthony was a fraudster. She knew that for sure now. But many questions remained. The main one: how to act. Anthony is a fraudster. Olivia has come into his sights. How will he behave? Threaten? Do something to her? To Alice? How terrifying. Tell us what happened, Victor asked gently. Well, it's not your problem. Why take on extra worries? Just leave your phone number. It might be needed. Tell us. Victor lightly patted Olivia on the shoulder. This gesture, it changed a lot. The woman suddenly realized she wanted to share. She wanted to very much. First, I should probably introduce myself, she sighed. My name is Olivia. That evening I was coming home from work. I came out of the shopping center and saw an elderly woman. She was asking people a question, but everyone was in a hurry. And Olivia told them everything. How she gave her money, about the morning call, the conversation with Anthony, her doubts, her anxieties. She had to reveal details of her personal life. How else would they understand why she hadn't gone to the police? Victor listened without interrupting. His mother periodically shook her head, clicked her tongue, sighed, interjecting angry remarks. She railed against Anthony, against Eleanor. Her former mother-in-law got her share. And James, who hadn't helped the mother of his child. What a monster. The old woman shook her head. He understood that Anthony was a fraud. Well, he could have met him, talked man to man. Yes, my dear girl, you have it hard. All by yourself. Having listened to Olivia, Victor thought in silence. His mother showered her with words of support. It was clear she sincerely wanted to cheer her up, instill confidence. At this care, tears welled up in Olivia's eyes, but she quickly blinked them back. This wasn't the time to relax. We'll expose this, Anthony, Victor finally declared. And so convincingly that Olivia felt with every cell. She wasn't alone. She had protection. Strange, unexpected. Victor and his mother are strangers. But not the slightest doubt. Victor knows what to do. I have a good friend in the investigative committee. I started there myself, then went into business. I needed money. My father was ill. I'll call my friend right now. I'll keep you informed. You'll have to come in and give a statement. When? I don't know, but soon. Olivia nodded. Now she wasn't afraid to turn to law enforcement. Thank you, the woman said. Thank you for your kindness. Why wouldn't I help a good person? The man smiled. This smile warmed her heart. You didn't pass by my mother when she was in need. And you got into this terrible situation only because of us. On the way home, Olivia replayed the conversation over and over. Can you believe it? Is it really true? She was seriously afraid that meeting Victor had been a hallucination. What if her brain, searching for a way out, invented the scene? No, that can't be. And yet, there were doubts. Victor called a couple of hours later. Olivia hadn't expected such promptness. She started at the sharp ring. Fear gripped her heart. What if it's Anthony again? Threatening, accusing. But Victor's cheerful voice came through the receiver. Can you be on Central Avenue in 40 minutes? They're waiting for you in office 307. They're informed there. Of course. Then everything happened with dizzying speed. Victor was waiting for Olivia on the steps of a tall building with columns. Seeing him, she felt relief. He was there. Everything would be all right. Victor escorted her to the investigator's office. He asked questions about Anthony. Olivia described his appearance and behavior in detail. If he calls, stall for time, the investigator said. We've put him under surveillance. We'll start gathering evidence, but we need a couple of days. Tell him you're applying for a loan or something like that. Your phone is tapped. You know, you signed the consent. We'll hear everything he says. Olivia nodded silently. Victor offered to drive her home. She gladly agreed. Not because she didn't want to go to the bus stop. No. Simply, how wonderful to spend more time with this man. She was surprised at herself. She had known Victor for such a short time. But next to him, she felt calm, peaceful. She didn't want to leave. What is this? The beginning of feelings? Or gratitude towards someone who wasn't indifferent? What does it matter? The main thing is, they'll see each other again. The case isn't closed, and Victor promised to see it through. So it will be. That evening, Anthony called again. On the investigator's advice, Olivia asked for a delay. You still won't believe that I didn't take the brooch? She asked, to make him confirm his claims. There was no brooch. But the man stubbornly insisted that Olivia had deceived an elderly person and swindled the precious item. Aren't you tired of pretending? Anthony hissed. You have the brooch. You took it from my mother, taking advantage of her helplessness. And now you're denying it. I'm calling the police. No. Olivia pretended to be scared. I can't be a suspect right now. The situation is such that it's easier to just pay the money. I've started applying for a loan, but the process isn't quick. You'll have to wait. About 2 days? All right, I'll call again. Anthony hung up. Olivia exhaled with relief. It worked. She had gained the couple of days the investigator needed. The rest of the evening passed as usual. Olivia helped her daughter with a project. They made dinner, played Monopoly. She tried not to think about Victor, but she couldn't help it. She kept remembering his pale blue eyes and smile. She chided herself. Most likely, he's not single. A wife, children, she's dreaming. If so, his other half is lucky. Being with such a person is immense happiness. The next day flew by, unremarkable. And then, during her lunch break, Olivia's mobile phone chirped cheerfully. A name appeared on the screen. Victor. Her heart sweetly froze. A chill appeared in her stomach. Who knew what news he was calling with? The man suggested meeting at a cafe near her work. Olivia warned her superiors about a possible delay and hurried there. Victor was waiting at a table. He looked calm and happy. From his face, Olivia knew everything was all right. She couldn't help but admire him. High cheekbones, confidence, a calm gaze. Good day. Victor rose slightly, pulled out a chair. Pure gallantry. I have some news. Good news. More than good. I'll start with the main thing. Anthony was arrested. It turns out he had many victims under surveillance simultaneously. About 5. And those are just the identified ones. 5? Olivia was slightly pleased by the information. So, I wasn't the only naive fool. 5, Victor confirmed. He told her details about Anthony. He grew up in an orphanage. He didn't want to work in his profession. A plasterer painter has to work hard. Anthony didn't like that. He liked a beautiful life and easy money. At first, he was a pickpocket, got caught a couple of times, but was lucky. The victims were moved by the orphan's pitiful story and withdrew their statements. Anthony realized it was risky, so he started acting more subtly. He figured out that there were many trusting and foolish people he could make money from effortlessly. He started scamming people over the phone. Many, without going into details, transferred decent sums. Anthony was sometimes surprised by the size of the transfers. But over time, it became harder, riskier, difficult not to leave a trace. He was invited to work for companies professionally engaged in such calls, where the risk was minimal. But Anthony dreamed of a solo career. He wasn't lacking in imagination or attentiveness. He liked inventing schemes, composing stories. Apparently, this was how his creative side manifested. With Olivia, it turned out interestingly. He accidentally saw her in court once. She had ended up there again because of her former mother-in-law. She easily proved that she was capable of raising her daughter. But Anthony figured, Olivia clearly wouldn't want to become the subject of a detective story, to get involved with the police. An excellent potential victim. She wouldn't just not report him, she could even be threatened with the police. He hit the mark. He knew how to draw conclusions. So Olivia became a potential victim. Anthony occasionally watched her, waiting for the right moment. But the opportunity didn't present itself. Olivia's life was measured, monotonous, even boring in Anthony's opinion. He wasn't worried. There was always work. People fell into his nets. And there was always a unique story. He was proud of some of his exploits. Once he managed to get an old woman from a neighboring building to sign her apartment over to him. He convinced the elderly woman that he was the child of her deceased son. It wasn't difficult. The elderly lady herself wanted to believe in a grandson. She was lonely, reclusive, with no relatives except a brother who expected to inherit the apartment. But it didn't work out. The apartment became Anthony's property. This was discovered after the grandmother's death. True, he no longer caught big fish, but Anthony wasn't worried. Greed was dangerous. And then suddenly he accidentally noticed how Olivia helped an unfamiliar old woman, and a plan formed in his head. The story came together on its own. Only one thing he didn't account for. Victor smiled. You accidentally ran into that very old woman at the shopping center. The probability was minimal. My mother lives far away, and Anthony had found that out. That's how circumstances aligned. I can't even believe it, Olivia said slowly. And what will happen to him now? He'll go where he belongs. He'll sit and think. The investigator pulled on the threads. So many victims were found. Many have given statements. Some are planning to. In short, romance and creativity await him behind bars. Olivia still couldn't believe that the problem that had poisoned her life these past few days no longer existed. The man took a deep breath and said, And I don't want you to think I'm taking advantage of being a savior, all that. But if I invited you to the cinema tonight, what would you say? Olivia felt warmth spread through her chest. Apparently, her emotions were visible on her face, because Victor understood everything and smiled.